Display in schools is something that is often grossly underrated. It's an area of experience that many people feel because they haven't had specialist training they're unable to cope with. Today in this programme the aim is largely to give you some idea of ways in which techniques, methods and ideas can be simply applied to the business of producing useful and enriching display. Children are very much affected by the environment they move around in. And in schools, an enriching environment is often strongly subscribed to through the use of display and what we call the learning environment. Not every school has a wide range of resources to work with. But I have, in this presentation, brought along quite a range of materials to show you the possibilities. Obviously, during the time you work with children, you'll need to select and reject accordingly. I'm going to start using a material that you don't very often let very small children use, and this is specifically for the use of teachers, a Stanley knife, for cutting paper on a board. Now, this is a cutting mat. It's something that I think schools should have. It's better than cutting on a piece of wood or on glass. It doesn't blunt your knife so quickly. In some schools, children are given the opportunity to work with materials and pieces of paper that are not standard. For example, circular pieces of paper, odd shapes they cut themselves. One of the examples I give is I went into a school on one occasion and children were being given the opportunity to write poems about raindrops and about thunder and lightning and so on and so forth. And for that, there's often the problem of how do you display variable shapes. I tend to say use a standard background. In this case, try and imagine, if you will, that these pieces of paper are the large sheets that we often get in schools, a sort of black cartridge paper. For this purpose, I need to fasten them up on a board. I'm using a petroleum-based spray that is COSH approved, I understand, non-toxic, but should be used with care. Now, although I'm spraying directly onto the board, in producing a large amount of work, I would expect you to use newspaper, lay the work down, spray onto it, and then dispose of the newspaper. That is a health and safety consideration. But for the purpose of this program, I'm using this method. Now let's look at the variable sizes of work that children might produce. Standard kind of work might be this shape. That will easily fit on. Round pieces of work. More round with perhaps a title. And here's the sort of thing that I saw in a school once, a child writing on his own shape of paper. Using a variety of shapes on a standard background, that pulls them all together. Moving on very quickly to circles. How to upset a circle? Well, you cut it in two, in this case. You can produce from that a wavy line very quickly. I use a circle just as an example. You could use a triangle, any one of a variety of ways of working. If I want to, I can then produce some square shapes to give additional emphasis. Yeah. Now you note in this instance I'm not using anything other than black and white. One of the problems very often in some establishments is the overuse of colour. This can detract from the main reason for display. It will overtake what you're actually trying to show. I'll give you an example of that later on. We live in a society that tends to be involved with symbols, signs and images. These days, if you want to go anywhere, you'll find signs that supplement the old idea of the Victorian finger pointing, an arrow now. So for this display, I'm going to use an arrow. The easiest way for me is to cut the arrow out of paper. And if I'm going to cut out, if I want several arrows, I can cut them all out at once, so they have some kind of unity. Even if they're not perfect, they still have a kind of unity. I might want to draw attention to one particular area on a display. For this, I can use my arrow. Might bring it from here. More adhesive needed. And then there's the consideration perhaps of colour. The first introduction of colour will bring emphasis to the display. The psychology of colour is fairly important. Red is usually a dangerous colour, used to draw attention, and it's probably the first colour you see when you look at any range of colours that are presented to you. A more subdued colour might be a yellow. And a pastoral colour would be green. Might be something over here you want to draw attention to. Drawing attention to text is not difficult if it's framed. So text can be related to, for example, an image. This may be the surround to a particular item or area on the display that you wish to draw attention to. It's important, I think, to remember that the Chinese say the less is the more, and I suppose that's the case in good display. The less you use of colour, the more the colour you use is noticed. So that is a maxim to perhaps take on board when you're doing display.